attractor patterns of very interesting things, and they can be creative or destructive. And a sense of vision or a clear purpose, they're attractor patterns, and they actually draw people. And so they're absolutely key. Now, they're different things. They're similar yet different, because a clear purpose answers the question why. Why are we doing this? And a vision answers what we're going for. Similar yet different. Just looking at purpose, great leaders always start with why. Because when we start with the why, we engage like-minded people and we engage the heart. Because the typical questions, what, how, who, when, where, these engage the mind. They're rational things. But the why engages something deeper. It attracts the core.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today I'll be speaking again with Peter Lawry, who is a featured teacher along with me in Rhonda Byrne's book, The Greatest Secret. Peter Lawry lives in Melbourne, Australia, where he focuses on awakening people to their true nature and living as flow, intuitively, creatively, and at ease. So, Peter, how does the work that you do in companies and what's spoken about in Rhonda's book, how do they complement each other? How do they connect?
Hale, when it all comes down to it, it's the same thing. There's a deep hunger within every human being for authenticity, for actually living deeply, spontaneously, naturally. And whether I'm dealing with a senior executive or a spiritual seeker, in the end, it's the same dilemma, the same issue, and the same hunger.
Yes, I agree with that. Everyone, whether they're conscious of it or not, are looking for the same thing. I noticed the same thing. I haven't done corporate work in a while, but when I worked in companies, there was definitely the same kind of hunger there. And it was wonderful to see that when you brought in these concepts in a language that they could understand, that they really embraced them, and it positively affected their bottom line, which is what they want too. So it all goes together.
Yeah,
so can you tell me the difference between vertical and horizontal development? Can you explain that?
Sure. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's a key distinction, Hale. And because most development is horizontal. And if you go to a business school or do a training course, it's usually horizontal development. And to explain it, I'd use a metaphor. Horizontal development is like a container, having a container, a cup, and filling it up. So whether that's learning communication skills or learning negotiation strategies or listening skills or learning to actually create visions, these things are horizontal. Wonderful, incredibly useful. Vertical development is a different order altogether. And to use the same sort of analogy, it's like a new container, a larger container with an increased capacity. Vertical development is like seeing the world through new eyes. When we see through the self-limiting stories, the mental models that we all build and create, when we start to see through those self-limiting stories, and then when we start to actually let go of those old hurts and pains, and those knots start to unravel, and when feedback starts to become something useful rather than something to defend against, things open up. And particularly when when we start to illuminate those blind spots, those dark corners in our psyche, and we start to discover a whole new capacity of being.
Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah, it's kind of like you can tell people what to do, and that is just adding to the accumulation. But if you help people see it from a totally new point of view, a more expanded point of view, more open point of view, more clear point of view, then the skills are secondary. It's not that you shouldn't have these skills, but it's secondary. The primary is shifting how they're approaching whatever the problem or the issue is. So very well put. Thank you.
Yeah. And how, it's how it's, and that distinction, it's not about information. It's, in the end, it's transformation.
Yes.
And, it's like, I remember I once was working with this very senior EU executive, and he had been put in charge of a committee that was looking at standards to change right across Europe. And all the members of the committee came from different countries and from different companies, so they're all positioning and jostling. Now, he was he'd been made the chair because of his technical abilities, but he was woefully equipped to actually deal with the job.
Right.
So when he approached me, he knew that his current reality just wouldn't work. And so working with him, we just discovered very quickly that he had old stories from his early life that to attempt to influence people or negotiate, that was wrong. He saw salespeople as like evil people. And so the skill set he needed to actually lift these people up to a higher plane of reality and start to explore different options, those skills were totally unavailable to him. And for him to be successful in this new role, it was like him becoming one of these bad people. So by looking deeply and exploring in those dark corners and those blind spots, he started to see through these self-limiting stories. And then he was able to quickly acquire the skills once he'd changed his mental model, once his eyes had opened. And of course, the results were way beyond anyone's expectations.
That's great.
This thing about vertical development, it's transform who we are.
Yes. Yeah, definitely transforming the container as opposed to moving things around in the container or filling it up. It's definitely much more effective. And the truth, and also, wouldn't you say that in personal development, the same thing is true too? It's not just in a corporate environment.
Absolutely.
What I found is when you work with individuals who have specific goals they're working on, generally the only obstacle is their mental mindset about it, not the situation. So if they let go of their mental mindset, then they're dealing with what is as it is, and it's much more effective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then how does what you do relate to allowing people to understand the gift that is now?
Yeah, well, that's the secret, and the present is the gift, because we're rarely here. Most of us live in yesterday, tomorrow, either projecting some idealized future or going back and rerunning some horror story. So this yesterday, tomorrow, yesterday, tomorrow, yesterday, tomorrow, we miss the only thing that is, this immediacy, the wonder of this present. And learning to just relax and be present to what is one of the secrets. And the funny thing is, even if you think about the yesterday, you're still here. Right. Even if you're fantasizing about tomorrow, you're still here. And this, it's so popular, this thing about trying to get into the now. I say, try to get out of the now. No matter where you are conceptually, you can only ever be here, because everything
Right.
simply happens here.
Yes, yes.
And so encouraging people to just rest and settle into this presence, they discover extraordinary things.
Yes, yes. Yeah, the
And,
now really is a gift. And also, I think if you're looking at this from a more business point of view, you can probably understand that the only time you can do anything about anything is now.
absolutely. This is it. This is all there is.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And Einstein, 100 years ago, said something exquisite. He said, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. And the trouble is, we've created a world that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift.
Yes.
And so when we actually stay present to what is, when we open up to this, the gift reveals itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the funny thing is how people think that being present, being here, means you just ignore the future. And people say, well, how do you plan? Of course, if we're sitting down planning, that's a present activity.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so creating a vision or a strategy or a plan is a very creative act. And the more present we are to it, the more effective we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And again, we had a plan to have this conversation. That's why we're having this conversation. There's nothing wrong with planning.
Absolutely.
The problem is most of us make a plan and then we don't let go of the plan and allow what is to be in this moment. We're still planning, sitting in front of someone, we're still planning how the conversation is going to go. And that just gets in the way.
Yes, it always amuses me, like disappointment is not a spontaneous activity. Because if I'm to disappoint, first of all, I'm not available to be here because I'm projecting about how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when that moment arises, I'm not available and present to the moment because I'm starting to compare, is this like how I imagine it?
Right.
Then it's only in the next moment because I can now disappoint.
That's right.
It's a long-term activity. It takes a lot.
Oh yeah, it takes a lot of work actually.
and likewise, just being simply here. It doesn't mean that we ignore the past, because
No.
one of the things that's so important is to actually to reflect and just be present and just be still and just reflect on the day, the moment.
Yes.
Just recreating and discovering the gift, the sacred gift in the present.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. And a lot of people change the external. They change how they're presenting without actually following through and changing both who they are, how they come, the inner container, but even their activities. And so how does what you do relate to that? Because to deal with that particular issue that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. And like in essence, it's the distinction between what we say and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I often find in corporate work, people love to focus on values, get together, what are our values, And of course, these are usually a list of shoulds. And they're good things, absolutely. Yet it's far more important to actually focus on behavior, what we actually do.
Yes.
Because every parent knows it's do what I do, not what I say. Everybody watches what we do. And so it's so critical. If you want to change, focus on behavior.
Yeah.
Focus on the doing.
Yes. And one of the things that also, not just in a company environment, but in life in general, is we're kind of rushing back to the now again. We're kind of rushing through the moment as though we could get out of it. I love when you said, try to get out of the now. I say that all the time to people when you can sense the rushing energy. I say, okay, wait a minute. Or when they're even more insidious for many people who are looking for spiritual growth, is they try to get into the now. And that activity is looking away from the now. So I always say the same thing. You said that try to get out of the now. And as soon as they do, they realize they can, and what a futile thing that is. So in our rushing, we often miss that time to just simply reflect on who you are, what's real, what's true, but also just even reflecting on what you're doing in your job or what you're doing with your company. So can you talk about that a little bit, the importance of building reflection into your life?
Well, reflection is one of the secrets of life. And this distinction we started with between horizontal and vertical development, reflection is one of the ways we enter into deep vertical development. And the thing about reflection, you have to build it in.
Say that again. You have to do what?
You have to build it in.
Oh, you have to build it in. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can't just add it on. Yes, I'll do that later, because that's the first thing that goes. You have to build it into the fabric of your life. And when I ran consulting companies, I would always insist that every meeting was 3. Pre-meeting, the planning, the meeting, then the reflection. And building reflection into the fabric of our life. And of course, in the business world, that's particularly easy because everything is templated. So you take a meeting, and if the meeting's for 1 hour, the last 10 minutes, reflection. And I found by working for years, for decades, mentoring people, whenever I have a deep conversation, we always spend the last few moments reflecting. What did we learn? What worked? What didn't work? How could we improve this? When you build that into the structures of meetings, you then start to have iterative, ongoing development as we learn and grow from our experience. Action reflection is the key.
Yes, yes.
And, it's sort of like there are always endings. End of the day, a natural time to reflect. And people often do that spontaneously in the train on the way home, or riding their bicycle home, whatever it is, just reflecting on the day, or sitting and chilling out in the evening, just reflecting, how did it go? Yes. End of the week, end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year. Just all of those markers can be a trigger to reflect.
Yes, yes, absolutely. But also, I don't think you mean look back on the event and second guess yourself. You're trying to, it's really more of a looking for what really worked, what might work better. It's a more positive thing, because a lot of people spend a lot of time reflecting on the past in an automatic way, or by beating themselves up, or second guessing themselves, and things like that. Can you give me the distinction?
Absolutely. And reflection is a present, still activity, just being there and just noticing and allowing the thoughts, the feelings, the images, the ideas, the insights just to appear and disappear, like watching the clouds in the sky, without buying into or ruminating, just simply just notice. And when we start to reflect on events, and we start to do that over time, we start to notice patterns. And the patterns, if we start to reflect on the patterns that appear, we start to notice the structure, the systems, the deep structure of our psyche, of our interpersonal plays. And when we just keep on just noticing, without judgment, without trying to change anything, simply being with, wisdom appears.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And also, how this relates, would you agree with this, that how this relates to someone who's not really wanting to use this to improve their business, that if you build in, you can also reflect on that there, you can reflect on patterns, absolutely, but you can also reflect on that which never changes.
Absolutely.
How was that living presence that I am present to whatever it is that I just went through?
Yeah.
That doing that, doesn't that also help people?
Oh, absolutely. And it's the same thing. It's just like action reflection. It's the key for transformation. And just about anybody who I work with, we come very quickly to reflection. And just building it in there, because a reflected life is a transformed life.
Great. Yeah, so often we rush through life and we don't really reflect on what's actually happening in this moment. We're so busy getting lost in the drama of it. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And how does purpose and vision fit into your work?
Well, there's a beautiful metaphor from chaos theory. And they talk about attractor patterns. And these are constellations of energy which draw energy. And the metaphor, it's rather like a snowball rolling down the hill. It starts small, and as it moves, it gathers up snow and gets bigger. And as it gets bigger, it starts to go faster. And as it goes faster, it digs in deeper and attracts more snow. So you have this accelerating dynamic. And so attractor patterns are very interesting things. And they can be creative or destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And a sense of vision or a clear purpose, they're attractor patterns. And they actually draw people. And so they're absolutely key. Now, they're different things. They're similar yet different. Because a clear purpose answers the question why. Why are we doing this? And a vision answers what we're going for. And similar yet different.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at purpose, great leaders always start with why. Because when we start with the why, we engage like-minded people and we engage the heart. Because the typical questions, what, how, who, when, where, these engage the mind. They're rational things. But the why engages something deeper. It attracts the core. I think it was the German philosopher Nietzsche used to say, when we understand why, we can tolerate almost any what or how. So
That's
the
interesting.
why, the why is so beautiful.
Yes.
And so just when like this is in all areas of life, children know this intuitively. Why? It's such a deep question. It's so profound.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And again, the why, sometimes whys also can get us caught in the mind. How do you ask why from the heart?
Yeah. It's a deep why. One that goes to what's really at stake here, what's really going on. And I can remember as a child, my father worked in the telecommunications industry. And as a young child, I knew that he was doing something really important. I knew why he went away on business, because he was helping put a phone in every home in Australia. Yeah. So that deep why engages profoundly. I remember I was working in Shanghai in the late 90s, and we gathered the organisation, the growing organisation together. We started to get clear on why we are working, why are we doing this, and they came up with a clear sense of purpose that they wanted to prove to the world that they could do this better than anybody.
Great.
And that just drove an extraordinary focusing of effort and energy.
Great. Wonderful. So also, you've been using metaphors, but the mind uses metaphors all the time. We're relating to the world through our filters, through our beliefs, through our ideas about the way it is.
Yeah.
And you have this wonderful metaphor or analogy that talks about that, having to do with metaphors. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, metaphors are really, they really open up the depths of who we are. Often working with people, I ask them, I often start with something like life is, and ask people to fill in the rest of the sentence. And some people would say, oh, life's a struggle, life's a bitch, life's a joy, life's a bowl of cherries, life's easy. And just that one-liner starts to indicate how they approach life.
Yes.
And so, the metaphors we hold really, really influence how we do things, who we are. And I found it so fascinating working in the business world that so many of the metaphors come from the sporting world.
Yes. Oh, they love sporting metaphors.
And so it's like kicking goals and and sort of improvements and targets and deadlines, and they're playing hardball. And so much of the language is sporting. Now, fabulous stuff. Nothing wrong with that at all, because it engages people. That's what metaphors do.
People can relate to it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yet that sort of metaphor is still. It's still the coach is in the telling realm. It's still horizontal.
Yes.
And so I used to often offer a different metaphor for the leader as a host. Now, again, that is something we all know about. We've all either hosted a good party or dinner party, or we've all experienced at least one really good party where the host did an extraordinary job. And so changing the metaphor for a leader from being a coach to being a host, so simple, yet so profound. And everyone intuitively knows what that means. And if you think about it, a good host sets up the environment, provides the context, provides the ingredients, the food, the alcohol, the music, depending what sort of party or setting we're having. And yet they don't control things. They act like a cat.
You can't control a party.
Of course not. So a good host was like, have you met so-and-so? Oh, do you, and they would connect people.
Yes,
or they may sit people next to each other to stimulate a good conversation. Or they may, say they may change the depth of the conversation. Or they interact, they stimulate, they nudge, but they don't control. And everybody just self-organizes, and the party is, extraordinary.
Yes.
And if we actually start to apply that into our work life, get a very, very different result.
Yes. Well, aren't you in that case, when you're applying it into work, aren't you trusting that each person's innate intelligence and intuition, if you create the right environment for it, is going to lead them into what's most efficient for their work and everyone else's?
Nailed it in one, Hale. Exactly. That's exactly what it's all about. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes. Like I remember a couple of years ago now, I was invited to New Zealand by the Minister of Sport, because the government was, they were looking at how they could more deeply engage participation in sport across New Zealand, because they're looking at health.
Yes.
People are active and healthy. And the younger generation were not so engaged. So they had their annual conference, and they had several hundred people there, and these are all the top administrators and bureaucrats from the Olympic Committee was there, the sports, the cricket administrators, rugby, tennis. They'd go. And of course, they would engage the local community as coaches. They would tell people what they were going to do and what they wanted them to do. And
what they should do. Right,
and it just wasn't working the way it used to.
No.
So I suggested this metaphor of the host. And it really, it struck home with many people. So they started to re-engage local communities as the host. What do you need? How can we support you?
Much better.
And of course, the engagement level went up, particularly with the younger generation, because they were offered autonomy, just as you said.
Right.
Trusting people's intelligence to self-organize and sort out what they needed and wanted.
That's perfect. Yeah. Great story.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And also, you talk about the importance of letting go of the fantasy of control. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. This gets to the core of the issues with so many people. Because that's this fear of letting go, this fear of losing control is what so many of us hold on so tightly. And when you see that there is no control, everything self-organizes. It's like when you start to look deeply at life, everything is networks. Networks are the way living systems self-organize.
Yes.
And everything always spontaneously organizes and reorganizes. I mean, there's a key word here, emergence. And that is, and whether we're talking about the weather system, the cells in our bloodstream, a social group, or an ecology, it all interacts. And there's patterns of interaction, and these patterns start to form, and they change the way we interact, and new things emerge. I mean, there's an analogy we've all seen many times. You're out in the country, you see a flock of birds flying, and they're flying, they suddenly all change direction as one. Or a school of fish swimming, and the fish just suddenly, in a nanosecond, all change direction. Now, this puzzled scientists and naturalists for decades. A lot of last century, people were exploring, how do they do this? Why do they do it? How does it work? And of course, looking through the mental model of control, who's the head bird?
Right. They sometimes look for that too, I know.
Absolutely. Who's the lead fish? And of course, so the answer just completely eluded. It's only relatively recently, with the increasing capacities of computers, that they've created mathematical computer simulations and discovered the laws governing this. And whether we're talking about a flock of birds or a school of fish, there are 3 rules which govern all this behaviour. Number 1, each bird keeps more or less the same distance from each other. Number 2, they all fly at about the same speed. Number 3, they all move to the centre. And that just creates this extraordinary, spontaneous, self-organising pattern, which moves and changes.
Yes.
And, our businesses are like that.
Yes.
Our families are like that. Our friendships are like that. And you can't control anything. You're like trying to control your thoughts. Try to predict what the next thought's going to be. Nobody knows. Everything arises. And so learning to be a host and just be present, be available, provide the conditions and the inputs that stimulate, nudge, encourage, and allow everything to move and flow.
Definitely.
Far more creative.
What's that?
Far more creative and much
Oh,
more
yeah.
fun. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Much more that basic harmony that you can see in nature, like you mentioned. I live in a place where there are shorebirds that spend a part of the year here. And when they fly, it's magnificent because there'll be thousands of them in the sky at the same time. And then they'll turn in sync, and the flocks change shape, but it's always this unified thing. And also, depending on the light, sometimes you can see the flock, and then if they turn, sometimes the flock just disappears for a second. And that it's a beautiful thing to watch, but it's something that's going on all the time in life, isn't it? That universal awareness or beingness, or whatever you want to call it, is really the underlying organizing principle of everything that we're experiencing. And it's not up to us individually. We're part of that universing one unified principle, and it's functioning through all form.
Yeah.
And so the business world is not an exception to that, right?
Of course. How could it be?
Right.
This same intelligence flows through everything.
Yes.
Decades ago, David Bohm, a quantum physicist, said that unbroken wholeness. Everything is just unbroken wholeness.
Yes.
Just flowing, interconnected. One.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Unbroken wholeness.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to add before we conclude? We've covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we have. Yes. Look, it's just on that. I remember one of my teachers, this old Aboriginal master, and I went to see him about 30 years ago, and I knew at the time that what he would do with people, he would walk them along the song lines to discover the mysteries of this ancient land we live in. And so I went to see him with a couple of my consultants, and we had our boots on. We were ready to walk.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at us and he said, "These fellas need to sit." And he sat us down for 10 days, just sitting. We hardly moved more than a few meters from the spot. And he would just sit there, and he would reach over and say, "Oh, look at this. See this?" He picked something up. This we used to make medicine. Oh, and this here, we used to make shoes from moccasins from this. And with hardly moving, he was just pointing out that we were actually living in the supermarket. And he had this beautiful expression, the every win. The every win. And that's what we're talking about, this every win. Timeless, beginningless, endless.
The every win. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So thank you. This was a beautiful conversation, and all the things that Peter talked about are certainly applicable into your everyday life. They aren't just useful in the business environment. And as you allow yourself to explore what he was talking about, I think you'll find great benefit in it. So thank you, Peter. I really appreciate your sharing your wisdom.
Yeah. And Hale, I would just simply encourage everyone to really work on their own transformation.
Yes.
Real deep development. And learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And just, it's okay to not know, just to rest in the unknowing.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Peter Lawry. You can learn more about Peter at nonduality.com.au. That's nonduality.com.au. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona Method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's SEDONA.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.